away and don't blink.
Yes, I'm a YouTube atheist, but try not to hold that against me.
Don't worry, Steve. We'll just hold the fact that you block everyone who disagrees with you against you.
Okay? Okay. Here are 5 toxic things about YouTube atheism.
The only thing toxic in this video is you, Steve, and the way you think.
Number 1, it has a sexism problem.
The only people with a problem with sexism are feminists and SJWs like yourself, Steve.
Many of the most popular atheists on YouTube are brazen anti-feminists
And that's what makes them sexist?
who insult and belittle women and men, but mostly women, who speak out against gender inequality.
I'm pretty sure you meant to say for gender inequality.
They also proudly deny the existences of things like...
Isn't it amazing how we can tell the difference between things that are real and not real, Steve? Like the way we proudly disavow the existence of God?
wage gap, rape culture, gender imbalances in political and cultural representation.
Well, that was just a bunch of SJW buzzwords strung together in a word salad.
And other problems that are widely accepted and seriously discussed.
Come on, Steve, be honest. You don't discuss anything with anyone. You block them.
Outside of the misogynist
YouTube atheists don't hate women, Steve.
circle jerk, okay? Jerk, circle, okay?
And circle jerk, really?
That is the atheist community on YouTube.
Well, I guess it's better than spreading cancer.
But lest you think that sexism is the only form of bigotry running rampant in atheist spaces on YouTube, let me assure you...
Don't worry, I won't let you assure me of anything, Steve.
Number 2, it also has a racism problem.
I'm sure this will make a whole lot of sense.
And it's the best kind of racism, too.
So apparently there's a best and worst kind of racism?
The willfully oblivious kind.
So almost like seeing no race at all? Kind of like a humanitarian approach to race? Treating all people the same kind of treating of race?
For example, black Americans who speak out against racial injustice are part of a victim cult.
Well, when you're constantly saying that you're a victim, people start to think that way.
Or the displacement of black folks by gentrification isn't a problem because it results in nicer neighborhoods with fewer thugs hanging around. Nicer neighborhoods with fewer thugs hanging around.
Nicer neighborhoods with fewer thugs hanging around.
Steve wants more thugs hanging around. Well, good for him.
Smoke weed every day. Thugs hanging around. Thugs hanging around.
Or, my personal favorite, the true outrage isn't racism, but people calling people like him racists.
Steve, what happens when you call people like him racist? When they're not racist, means the word racism loses all of its meaning.
Because why would anyone think that the black guy who makes a virtue out of publicly not giving a shit about the white people was a racist? It's ridiculous! Hang on, I'm not done.
Steve, do you even realize how racist that sounds? I may have edited this clip, but that's just to prove a point. Steve is ridiculous.
Number 3, it has a religious bigotry problem too.
Steve? Steve? Do you know what atheism means? Like, you don't believe in gods or the religions that claim that there's gods, and that's, you know, what?
What? What? What? What?
The ugliest religious bigotry in the YouTube atheist community is, of course, directed at Muslims, who are commonly stereotyped as potential terrorists and whose religion is viewed as inherently worse and more dangerous than any other. But there's still plenty of judgmental condescension left over for Christians and religious folks in general.
Hey Steve, I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret here. Atheists don't like any religions, and the whole point of us making fun of these religions, you see, is that we're sick and tired of all these things these religions are doing in our day-to-day lives, and we need to speak out against all this stupid propaganda and nonsensical, non-scientific gibberish. I mean, Recently, Ken Ham built an ark with taxpayer money. Like, are you, like, that's retarded. Like, nobody needs that. That money could have been spent on, you know, anything else. But I digress. I mean, we don't like the ones that oppress us the most, and currently the Christians aren't doing that much more oppressing than, say, like the Muslims in other countries that are doing some really bad stuff right now. Steve, I don't know if you've seen the news, but there's some pretty bad stuff going on right now.
Many YouTube atheists will still cite belief in God as evidence of mental illness.
We're also including feminism in that now, too. Well, and social justice in general, because the regressive left has clearly lost any sense of credibility.
Thus denigrating religious folks and the mentally ill at the same time, not that they give a shit.
Same way you give a shit about the truth, Steve.
Number 4, it's addicted to drama and conflict.
Welcome to the internet, Steve.
Some of the most watched atheists on YouTube today began making videos in response to creationists.
Huh, go figure. Atheists have a problem with the way that creationists see the world?
Some of them conducted themselves with class, dignity, and intellectual honesty, striving to have civil conversations with often exasperating adversaries.
Those are two things you've never done, Steve, because, well, you can't. You've blocked anybody who could actually debate against you.
But even back in those less fractious early years, before the community's pervasive racism
Nope.
and sexism surfaced,
No, you can't do that, Steve. Just because you say it that is true doesn't make it true.
the most popular personalities were those who gleefully bullied their targets. Small wonder then that once the creationist opponents had been exhausted, the bullies turned and found new enemies within atheist circles. And it turns out that most people who enjoyed watching obnoxious white dudes attack Christians were just as entertained by watching those same obnoxious white dudes attack women, Muslims, and racial justice activists.
Alright, you say women, but what you meant to say was feminists. We all get it. But maybe if, you thought for 1 second, Steve, that all these people have one thing in common, and it's that they believe in ideologies that clearly make no sense. No sense, alright? No sense. We're pointing it out, we're pointing out what doesn't make sense, and making fun of how ridiculous their ideas are. I mean, it's the same as religion. There is no difference.
That the YouTube atheist community is now dominated by professional trolls.
Steve, sometimes I wonder if you're actually just a professional troll for the regressive left.
Who manufacture conflict in order to generate content and views would be bad enough if the damage they caused was confined to YouTube. But it's not.
And that's the way we feel about all those really terrible ideologies that are trying to push their authoritarian vision of what is right and wrong into our faces.
Number 5, it reflects poorly on the rest of the atheist movement. Ever wonder why, with a few notable exceptions, YouTube atheists are not invited to address secular conferences or represent atheist organizations to the public?
Well, if you're talking about that last abomination that just happened, it's probably because it was infested with the SJW types who completely took what it's actually about and made it into what they wanted it to be about, which wasn't atheism at all.
If you're lucky, your first contact with atheism on YouTube came in the form of one of the more responsible voices, like
Oh, here comes a list of his favorite YouTubers.
R and Raw,
Calls himself a feminist. Calls all people who aren't feminists misogynists.
Seth Andrews, or Matt Dillahunty.
Well, I actually like Matt Dillahunty quite a bit, but I mean, he does all the things that atheist YouTubers do to Christians on his show. He makes fun of them pretty hardcore sometimes.
We atheists like to pat ourselves on the back.
Well, he pretty much goes on just pretty much saying it's TJ without saying TJ the amazing atheist's name. I mean, clearly, Steve, we all know who you're talking about.
For being more reasonable than the religious folks. But
I actually think we just care more about the truth.
I don't think that's true.
Well, we seem to use reason better than the religious folks, at least at talking about their religion.
I don't think that's true.
We actually don't care what you think is true, we actually care what is true, Steve. That's a big difference, actually.
And judging by the most visible representatives of our movement on YouTube, the most unreasonable belief shared by many of us might be the belief that we're the reasonable ones.
Steve, you fucking moron. What the fuck are you smoking? Nobody here believes any of that. It's clearly, evidentially true that we are the more reasonable ones.